Alright, so here is one of my older terrain boards that I've used. It's pretty useful because of the double-sided, one side's grass and the other one is tiles, but it's really thick. This thing is coming in about 1 inch, and when you start collecting a couple of these, they really take up space. Now, this is my newest Ultimate Dungeon terrain, and you've probably seen this in a couple videos now, but this thing is coming in under just like less than half of an inch. So I can make quite a few of these and they just don't take up nearly as much space. And that's really what I'm going for. I want something functional, easy to store, but still looks good and isn't too expensive. And I acknowledge that's a lot to ask for, so that's why I'm making it myself. So you can also see this one that I've already cut out is a little bit bigger than my previous dungeon terrain. That's because I want it to be wilderness focused and I need a little bit more space. And this is just cut from cheap dollar store foam core. Now you're also going to want to pick up some foam board from your local craft store. This is the stuff that's sold in like packs of 3s and the glue is really tight so you can't peel it off like the cheap dollar store foam core. The reason you want both is because that thicker density is going to really add some significant and serious structural integrity to this board. This is just a tray I took from my kitchen that happened to be the right diameter for what I was looking for. You could find something circular in your house, or if you have a compass, you can use that and make your circle whatever size you'd like. Also, make sure you have a fresh X-Acto blade knife. Mine, as you'll see here, was not as fresh as it could have been, and I ran into a couple snags along the way. But definitely take your time when you're going around trimming this thing up, and feel free to make a couple mistakes and just clean it up later. Now here you can see what I was talking about with not having a sharp blade or just not pushing hard enough when you're cutting, but hey, if your blade is sharp, you shouldn't have to push too hard. And once you've got most of it cut out, it's fairly easy to just go back and clean up these last little straggler bits. And voila, we've got a great circle. Nope, we've got 2 great circles. So the next step here is to get your adhesive that you're going to use to glue these 2 pieces together. The professor over at Dungeon Craft has recommended to use this DAP Quick Seal. I literally just took this straight from his video, and this stuff worked great for me, just like he said. So you can get this at your local hardware store. Just make sure it's that kitchen and plumbing type, and just smear it all over the place. Also, this tube is fairly inexpensive. I think it was about $5 or $6. We're not working with super expensive state-of-the-art materials here, so should be easy to find. And there we go. Once you have good coverage, just take your time when placing this down. I kind of rushed it and realized I had to kind of move it and slide it to adjust it so that it lined up and matched evenly with both pieces. You'll also notice here that it's starting to warp pretty bad, but don't worry about that. We'll address that later. Now I went back and grabbed that tray from my kitchen because I know that inevitably somebody's going to ask what the diameter of that thing is. And just so you can see here, it's about 15 inches across. And that's kind of about the distance I was going for with this project. Just needed a little bit more space. And once you've got those edges perfectly lined up, go ahead and grab something heavy and fairly useless and weigh it down. And you can just leave this overnight. No, you definitely don't need to leave this overnight. This stuff hardens in about 2 or 3 hours or so. In fact, it might be easier if you just do this next part and trim up those edges that didn't match up evenly while it's still wet. Otherwise, you'll have a pretty hard time cutting through that glue from the overflow. Now, I was really unsure about this next part. I decided to coat everything in Mod Podge just because I've heard that this helps kind of anti-warp things. And if you put it on one side, it'll kind of warp it and shrink and pull the material one way. If you put it on the other side, it will go back. So because of that warpage and because of the weight after the glue drying and me still feeling like it wasn't quite as flat as I would like it to be, I decided to just throw a coat of Mod Podge on. Does this work? I don't really know. It seems to have worked in the final project or final product of this build, but I don't know if that was just because of the PVA glue from the next part or not. Again, I don't know if this is a super critical step or not, so I may or may not skip this part for any future terrain projects. The other thing you'll notice here is I'm going to put some texture on with some aluminum foil. Normally this is what I would use when I'm making like a dirt or a stone kind of texture, but for this thing we're covering it in grass flock, so it might not matter honestly, but I think that the little crevices that the foil makes actually helps some of that foam have some more depth to it, and in my head that logically made more sense for this looking better. So here's some cheap burnt umber paint from my local craft store. I just laid this stuff on thick, and that way if and when the flock were to come off, because remember I wasn't sure if this was going to work out the way I wanted it to, at least underneath you would see like a cool painted brown sort of dirt as opposed to just white foam, which is what I didn't want to have shown up. So yeah, just cover this whole thing in paint. You could probably do black paint. I think the brown looks great though. Don't forget to get the sides. Now before we get to any sort of glue PVA flocking, make sure that that paint is completely bone dry. You don't want any of that paint mixing in with your flock and making it look kind of muddier. Unless you do. I didn't want that, but... So this is a spray bottle I got from a hardware store. You want to take out this little filter thing. That'll get clogged up with PVA glue real quick. And you can see me breaking it here, which is totally fine. Just, you can reattach that straw to the other side. And then you're just going to mix up some PVA glue and water. There's no exact science to this. I just mixed about equal parts and it seemed to work fine for me. Now this feta container just has a bunch of flock from Woodland Scenics. It's a mixture of the like green grass, earth, and burnt grass colors. And it's all just the fine turf stuff. Now, again, there's no science here. Just keep mixing them and blending them all together until you get a good combination of colors that you like. You can see I've already kind of had some on the board. I wanted to test the glue first, so that's why it looks like there's already little bits of green on there. Now you'll see I'm kind of getting this jet blast, and you really want to go with more of a fine mist on this spray bottle. It takes a minute for the glue to go up the straw through the spray bottle, but after a minute I do get a more fine mist. And that also helps to make sure you're not, pressure washing your flock off of your terrain piece. And once this thing is sufficiently soaked in glue, then you can do your special spice mix and just cover the whole thing. And once you've got a really good coating of all of that flock, you're going to want to go back again, grab that glue, that watered down PVA glue, and spray the whole thing again. Now, I do this a couple times because I really want to make sure that all of those foam flock bits just soak up all of that PVA glue, and that the glue goes deep enough into the board to stick to the board. So yeah, you can see I'm really just soaking this board with glue. And once this dried, I did come back, and here's another clip of me re-soaking it. And it literally just looks like a marsh. Don't worry about those white spots. That will, when it dries, it'll dry more how the flock looks. So don't be concerned if you see all of that. And just keep doing another layer of glue. Glue on glue on glue. I did about 3. And once it fully dried, you can see here, it's pretty dried. That flock's not going anywhere. I'm rubbing it here pretty hard, and you can see nothing's really coming off. And that's exactly what I wanted. Now, I did mention that if you're using PVA glue, you might get a little warpage on this board. You can see from the side here, it's slightly warped. It's not too bad, honestly. But what I found that actually does help, and even if the glue is dry, you can still weigh it down and that'll flatten out. So just grab a bunch of your books and prop them on top and let that sit for probably an hour or two, and it should be nice and flat. All right, let's go check out what it looks like.